So controversial was the European Commission's plan to simplify its digital rules this week that it caused uproar before it was even published. Welcome to Tech24. Today we're talking about how Brussels plans to relax its grip on AI regulation and make some edits to the Bible of data protection, the GDPR. Take a listen first to tech czar Henna Virkkunen on Wednesday.
Regulation alone is not enough, as we know. We must also move from rule-making to innovation building. Our rules should not be a burden, but an added value.
So what's on the table? The Commission wants to tweak the landmark GDPR to allow companies to process pseudonymized data not linked to your name. It also wants to reduce those annoying cookie banners and recognize AI training as a legitimate use of personal data. Now, to help us out with all of this, I'm joined by Mr. Brussels, our EU correspondent, Dave Keating. Thanks for being on set with me.
Great to be here.
So the Commission says this is about fostering innovation, fostering growth. Why the instant backlash?
Yeah, the Commission is really presenting this as a technical exercise that's meant to make these rules less onerous. The Commission says that this will result in 5 billion euros saved by companies over the next 4 years. However, digital rights activists say that this is rolling back the EU's tech regulation because of a request, or really the intimidation of the US government. The European Digital Rights group of NGOs called this a major rollback of EU digital protections. And Thierry Breton, the former tech chief at the European Commission before he was ousted after publicly criticizing President von der Leyen, he said that, quote, "No one is fooled over the transatlantic origins of these attempts." So essentially the suspicion here is that the Commission is doing this because the Trump administration pressured them to make EU regulation easier for American big tech companies.
Okay, so that's the geopolitics of it. But what about ordinary European users? Is this about more than just how many clicks you make on those cookie banners that pop up?
Yeah, that's going to be the main change that people will see. And I think that's going to be universally welcomed. I don't know anyone who doesn't find those cookie banners incredibly irritating and largely pointless. So that will be changed. Essentially, there'll be a one-stop consent for those cookie banners so that you could say, okay, I want to accept all of them and not have to keep continually clicking that. That's probably the only part that citizens would notice on their day-to-day lives. But behind the scenes, this would make a difference to how their data is processed and transferred, and most particularly, how it's used by new AI programs to train their algorithms. So the EU's AI Act and its GDPR provisions were supposed to prevent the use of personal data from EU citizens to train AI models. Now that would be walked back. It wouldn't be considered data that's too sensitive to use to train.
Okay, and you touched on before Washington's fingerprints being on this. What evidence do we have for that?
Well, we have the evidence that this is exactly what the U.S. administration publicly asked for. So way back in February at the AI summit here in Paris, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance gave a speech calling the EU rules onerous, saying that they should be simplified. He had a private meeting with Ursula von der Leyen. After that, the Commission immediately scrapped some of its planned AI liability rules. And since then, the U.S. administration has been really pushing for this. There was a committee set up in the U.S. House of Representatives calling these EU digital rules a foreign censorship threat. And also Marco Rubio has circulated a memo to the US embassies here in Europe saying that they should lobby against these EU tech rules. So the evidence is simply that this is what the US asked for, and now they seem to be getting it, at least partially. This isn't everything that the US wants. They want it to be, they want the DSA and the DMA, two other EU tech rules, to be walked back as well. The fear here is this is just the first step, and the Commission is preparing to further erode EU tech regulations at the US government's request.
And the next step is maybe deciding not to take a step and delaying implementation of rules on high-risk AI. Is this going to be dangerous, as critics suggest, or is it kind of just bureaucratic shuffling?
This makes a big difference when you talk to the EU tech rights people, because they say that the proposed delay here is by 18 months. AI is moving so fast. So if you delay the forbidden use of certain high-risk AI applications, such as social scoring, facial recognition, this type of stuff, if you say, okay, we're not going to restrict that now for an additional 18 months, in that 18 months, that becomes commonplace, the use of AI for social scoring and facial recognition, and then it becomes even harder to regulate 18 months from now. So the digital rights advocates are saying, this isn't just a small delay, you're effectively ceding that these high-risk AI uses will become commonplace, and by the time you try to regulate them, it will be too late.
Dave Keating, thank you so much for taking time out from your weekend away in Paris, and have a good trip back to Brussels. Thanks for joining me.